I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you at this time for chapel, even though it is from a distance. I was told that I could speak about the things that I do regularly in my work, but I decided to speak about my recent trip to Lima, Peru, and use some of the things that happened to me there to apply it to our calling. In Acts chapter 16, verse 9, a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia stood and pleaded with him, saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." This was a call for spiritual help. This was a call for gospel instruction. This was a call for salvation. And when the apostle received this call, he and his companions immediately went to Macedonia, concluding that God was calling them to preach the gospel to them. And what a blessing it was for the world. People are still calling today. They're calling from Europe, they're calling from Africa, they're calling from South America, and they're calling from the US. The question is not, are they calling? But it is, will you answer to that call? Will you come to them? A few months ago, I received a call. Of course, this was not a vision. It was an actual call from Lima, Peru, South America. A preacher, his name is Oscar, who my home congregation supported, had been fighting cancer for about a year, and now his health was rapidly declining. He expressed his desire to see me, so I made plans and went to Peru last year in November. When I arrived at Lima, I realized that more people were calling. In Acts 16:9, there's only one man calling. Yet, when we read the rest of the chapter, we see that this was the call of many more people. That was the case in Peru. Since I don't have the time to talk about all these callings, I will talk about three. First, in Peru, I realized that the fainting, wavering, was calling. There are people who are calling because they need to hear the gospel for the very first time. And there are people who, having heard the gospel before, have left the Lord or have allowed their circumstances to discourage them and have lost their first love. This was the case of Cesar, an old friend of mine who had left the church a while back. I talked to the preacher and his son and asked about Cesar. They told me that they have seen him and tried to encourage him, but he had not come back. He was focused on his work and traveling everywhere, even out of the country, but at that time he was in Lima. I asked the preacher's son, a young man in his 20s, "Would you call Cesar and ask him if he would like to meet with us?" He did. We met with Cesar in a mall and drank some coffee. We talked about the old times and many other things. Then I asked him, "What happened? Why are you in this situation?" He told me about some of his problems with his wife and work. Then I said, "Well, you have to come back again. Completely. You have to come back to the Lord and restore your first love." He nodded. I pressed on. "Tell me, are you going to come back?" He said with a sad face, "Yes, I need to come back." "Then why are you sad? You are coming back to the Lord. He is going to receive you." He looked at me and smiled and said, "Yes, I will come back." And he did. And he is still there, helping the church today. When we left, I could see the face of the young man who was with me. He seemed to be a little bit confused. Maybe there were some questions in his mind. "Is that it? Is that how you restore someone?" There was no persuasion. You just fasted him and he took it. Yes. And you cannot do that with everyone. But I knew Cesar. He was my friend. He had preached along with me in the past. I didn't need to convince him. I knew he loved the Lord. He just needed a push from someone who could talk to him directly and honestly because of the relationship he had with him. Here is the point. Each one of us has someone who we can reach in a more efficient way than others. We have a greater relationship with that person. Others may try to reach him, but he might not listen to them, but he will listen to us. Do not wait for others to answer the call that you may be able to answer more efficiently. Would you come to restore the wavering? Second, in Peru, I also realized that the dying was calling. Oscar, the preacher in Peru, was dying, and I didn't know it. Yes, I knew what was going on. I had been talking to him on the phone every week, and I could see that his voice was getting weaker and weaker. But I thought that he would still be able to preach, walk here and there, and do other things. I was hoping to go some places with him and maybe eat in a restaurant with him. But I was not prepared to see him confined to a bed. It was clear when I went there that he was dying. I had him, I cried with him, and I cried with his family. Then I asked myself, what does a dying Christian want to hear? So I began to talk to him about heaven. In my mind, I thought, hopefully, if I can confirm in him the hope of heaven, he will feel better. He listened to me for a while, and then he began to talk about heaven himself. And let me tell you this, you have never heard about heaven until you hear it from someone who is about to go there. Then I realized he does not need to be confirmed about the hope of heaven. His faith was strong, yet he was enjoying the conversation. It was clear that he wanted to hear about heaven, but not because he was doubting about heaven. He just wanted to hear about heaven from someone who believed it as much as he did. He just wanted a partner in the faith. Would you be that partner for someone? Would you come to strengthen the dying? And third, in Peru, I also realized that people were just calling. The man in Acts chapter 16 is just calling. He's asking for help, but you don't know what kind of help he needs. The preachers will figure it out later. People in Peru were just doing that. They were calling. My trip to Peru was actually 1 week before the time I went. But one day before I was supposed to travel, I received another call, this time from my sister who lives close to Nashville. She was crying desperately. The doctors had found that she had acute leukemia, and the only way for her to survive was to start aggressive chemo as soon as possible. My mom lives with us, so I had to tell her the news, and we both decided to travel to Nashville to see her. I called Oscar and told him what was going on and that I had to cancel my trip and didn't know when I would be able to go to Peru. My mom and I came back the next day because we could not see my sister. She was admitted to a high-risk area of the hospital, and we could not see her for at least about a month. When I came back home, my wife encouraged me and said, I think you need to go to Peru, because if you don't go soon, you might not be able to go at all. So a few days later, I purchased a new ticket and called Oscar and told him I was coming. I never felt more inadequate and powerless than when I went to Peru this last time. I thought I had some ideas on how I would handle the situation, but they didn't work. One day I was in his house, sitting in the living room with his children. Oscar was laying close by. His wife was by his side. Then he fell asleep, and his wife came to the living room, and she began to cry. We prayed together, and then she told me, thanks for coming. I said, I wish I could do more for Oscar, you and your children. Then she told me something that changed my perspective. She said, you know, last week when you received the news of your sister having leukemia, I thought to myself, that's it. I don't think he's coming. I didn't want for Oscar to have his hopes up. And I told him, Oscar, you know that his sister got leukemia. He might not be able to come at all. Then he looked at me and smiled and said, I know he will come, and I am glad you did. Then I realized Oscar never expected me to take away his pain, to heal him, to make him forget, to change his circumstances. He just wanted me to come. Sometimes I hear people saying, why would I go to a foreign land when I cannot speak the language? Why would I go knock doors when I don't know how to preach? Why would I go visit the sick and the suffering when I don't know what to say? And the answer is always because they are calling. If we wait to learn the language, to have excellent Bible knowledge, to find the best words, most likely we will miss the call. We will never come. Yet, if we come, we can do more with the Lord than we thought we could ever do. The question still remains, will you come?